Hey there, Power Platform enthusiasts. Today, Superfloof and I are going to be showing you how to build a dynamic parallel approval process in Power Automate with SharePoint powering the approvals. In this tutorial, we're going to tackle parallel approvals, where multiple people can review a document at the same time. Not only that, I'm going to show you how to make it dynamic because we're going to pull approvers from a SharePoint list based on their roles. And if a rejection happens, we've got that covered too with a smooth resubmission process. Here's the best part. Our PowerApp keeps track of every approval and rejection loop. You'll see exactly who was assigned, who approved, or who rejected it, and when it all happened, all inside the app. One source of truth and no more guessing where things got stuck. By the end of this video, you'll have a fully automated approval system that's fast, flexible, and eliminates unnecessary details. Let's get started. Here we are in the finished app. I've done videos on how you can create all of this before, so go back and look at my play history. This is a document submission app. So in the back end, we have 3 levels of approvals. Now, 2 are always going to happen, but 1 is only going to happen on occasion. And this use case is unique, so modify it as you need. So here we have a SharePoint list giving us our approvers, right? So we have legal, ops, and compliance. And you see I have a column for active. Let's say Natalia wants to go on vacation. We can set her as inactive, and we don't have to make any other changes. The app will look for that cue. Just a little way to future-proof your apps. Now, if we go back to the app, we're leveraging a main screen here that shows all of the active requests. If we select on one of these, this is a new request. We're able to see the details of what was submitted. And here we have a tab for review details. And this is where people can submit a document for review when they're ready. And you saw that you just click here, and then you can add comments. I always like to do these pop-ups, and I did a video on how you create the pop-ups before, so go back and watch that. But this guarantees that someone can't say, oh, I submitted it early on accident. This holds their hand through the process. Now you see here how we have document details, review details, and then an appending notes section. Let's go back to the main screen and look at one that's been approved. And you see we have an additional tab. I'm leveraging modern tabs. So here we can see all the different approvals that this has gone through. The first time it went through, it was rejected. Here we're capturing who it was assigned to. So in compliance, and you'll see there's a little bit of wonkiness because I was testing things, but it was assigned to Rick and Natalia. I approved it. It was assigned to Rose and Baron. I approved it. And it was assigned to legal, and I approved it. We'll get into that in a minute. But the approval comments, here we capture that no comments were done, when it was done, the status, all of this in one place. Now, if we go to prior approval 2, here we see the same things, but we're able to track how many times this document has been through the approval lifecycle. Now, this is a one-to-many relationship. We have one main record, and then if we go back into the app, I have a SharePoint list that tracks every single one of these as a separate line item. I've done a video on that too, so go back and watch that. But today what I wanted to cover was how do we submit one of these for approval? Let's play the app, and I'm going to select this new one and go to review details. This is where people can come in and send it for review or send it for approval. If we go into the back end here, what's going on when we click this button? If we select the button, we're leveraging a pop-up variable. We're setting a variable called pop-up, and I've done videos on this. That brings up all of this window. Now on the submit function, let's look at the code here. We're patching, but this is the part that I want to focus on today. We're calling our Power Automate. So if I come over here to the ellipsis and go to Power Automate, here is the actual approval process tied to the app. Now we can open the Power Automate from here, but it'll open it up in the classic designer. So let's just go to flow.microsoft.com or make.powerautomate.com. And here we have the flow in the modern designer. So since we're calling the flow from Power Automate, we're passing it some variables. So we're passing it the ID of the master record, and you see here how I've annotated everything, and there needs to be a period there. And then we're also capturing the email of the submitter. So let's do a quick overview. I'm initializing a lot of variables. I'll step you through this in a minute. Now, at the time of this recording, you cannot put variables into scopes. Microsoft, if you're watching, please give us that ability because that would be really nice. Now, as we scroll down, after we get all of our variables set up, we're going to get the item that was submitted from the ID that we passed it from the PowerApp, right? So we're going to get all the details. Then we're going to get items from our approvers list. We're going to look and see all the approvers that are legal. And that's because in this use case, we had to capture if the submitter was in the legal department or assigned to a legal approvers, they also had to approve this. I don't know why this was their use case, but that gave me an opportunity to do a video for y'all that shows conditions and how we can do 3 parallel approvals. So now that we have the legal approver and we have all of our variables, we're going to create our item. Now, when we're creating our item, we're creating that in our tracking list. Now, if we go to our tracking list, this is our one-to-many relationship, and I've done videos on this. So here is our tracking list. So each one of these records is an approval process, and we're tying it back to our master record with a master ID, back to the Power Automate. So we're creating the item in that list, and here we have our 3 parallel branches. All 3 of these parallel branches are within a scope. A scope is a format or a tool within Power Automate that allows us to group everything together. You add parallels by right-clicking on the plus sign and selecting Add a Parallel Branch. If we wanted to add a scope, you would left-click on the plus, Add Scope, type in Scope, and it's a control. Now, you can see here how they're all minimized. As I click through, you see how now we're able to expand and contract things. It just makes the flow so much easier to see. So let's combine them back up. Now, after our parallel branches, this is where we capture our condition. So if any one of these 3 items has rejected as the outcome, because we're doing an out-of-the-box approval flow in there, or if the legal is null. I mean, what that means is if nobody in legal had to do the approval, that would be null. And then what we're doing here is if it was rejected, we update the tracking list with it rejected. We update the main list item with rejected. And if it's approved, we do the same thing. Okay, there's a basic overview. Let's build this together. Here we are back in our Power App. Now, the easiest way to add a Power Automate to a Power App is to actually come in here and go to Power Automate and add a flow. Now, you can add one that you've already created, or you can click Create a New Flow. Now, it's going to come up and give us some options here, but you would probably want to do it from blank. You could use a template if you like. And when you do that, it will then give you the classic user interface. And this is where we added in those 2 steps, right? We're going to add an input, and one of them is going to be a number, and that's going to be the ID. And you always want to annotate. And then because this use case, we need an email, we're also going to leverage the email. And this is going to be the submitter email. And please enter the email address of the submitter. So all these annotations will tell someone who has to come later on and work on this what's going on. The other thing you want to make sure you do is name your flow right up here at the top. It's not intuitive, and you won't be able to save it until you do, but, well, you will be able to save it. Here, let's give it a name. Because it won't let you save it now until you add another step. You have to do just a few basic things here, but we're not going to build it here. This is how you would start it. Add in a variable or a step, hit save, and then you would probably want to go back to Power Automate because the out-of-the-box or the new designer is just so nice. So if we go back to our flow, once you have your flow created, back to Power Automate, once you have your flow created and tied to your app, then you can call it. Now, if I go into my yes submit and we expand out the code, let's say I didn't have this in here. I'm going to comment out this line. Now, you would just start typing, and IntelliSense will help you. You need to first call the name of your flow. So document submittal, submissions approval run. And then IntelliSense will help you through it. The first thing that you're getting is the ID. Because in my use case, I'm using a variable for the record. It's going to be var this item .id. And then the next thing is going to be the email. So it's going to be var this item again, dot who created this. Created by email. And there we have the code to call the flow. So let's undo this because I don't want to break everything. Oh, If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, I'll add this after the video drops so you can download and play with the flow, the PowerApp, and the data lists in the back end too. So if you want to really get into how to build this and play with one, you can download it. Let's get back to our Power Automate. So here we have the ID and the submitter email. Now, at the time of this recording, again, you can't put variables in scope, but before you use a variable, you have to create it. So let's initialize a variable. We hit the plus and type in variable, and we want to initialize the variable. And that's what you do, and then you come up here and you rename it because you don't want your coworkers hating you if they have to come in and work on it after you. You see how many variables I have? If they were all just initialized variable, you'd have to go into each one and, well, you don't need that hate in your life. So what are we doing here? We're initializing a variable for the comments. So it's going to capture at each approval stage the comments, if they give us any, of the responder. Then we're capturing another variable. We're initializing variable. This is going to be the approvers, the ops group. Then we have the comp group. Then we have the legal group. Then we're going to initialize a variable for the tracking status. We're going to initialize a Boolean variable for if this approval is a legal one, if it was submitted by someone who is in our SharePoint list that is assigned to legal. Then we're going to initialize another string variable for final status. Okay, so now that we have all our variables created, we're going to get an item. So we would click on the plus sign left, get item, and this is back from our SharePoint list. So we're going to get a single item, not items, item. And then if we look at the code here, we tie it to our SharePoint site, we tie it to our list, and then which item are we getting? We're getting the main record, and that's the ID that we passed it from the PowerApp. Okay, so the next step is we're going to append to array the variable of the legal approver. So we are going to get the created by email address from the item that was created here. And that's again for this use case. You may or may not need this. Then we're going to get items. Remember I said get item versus items. What we're doing here is we're going out to our approvers list, and I'm filtering that approvers list by the approval type equals legal. So if we go back and we look at that list, we are going to this SharePoint list, and we're looking at the approval types. That's the actual name of the column. Now you'll see here that approval types, there's no space, but here approval type has a space. How do we get the actual name of the column? There's two ways of doing that. We could sort by the column, and you see now in the URL, it gives us the actual name right here of the column. There's another way of doing this because Microsoft likes to give us multiple ways of doing things. We can go to list settings and go to approval types, and when we click on it, there's the field name, the actual field name as well. So two ways of doing things. So we are getting the items, because it could be many, where the approval type equals, and you have to make sure you put tick marks because it equals legal. Now that's a choice column, so I copy and paste it because I don't trust myself to type things same every time. Now I have a scope, and I've labeled the scope. Is item a legal submission? So what we're doing here, and we have for each loops within a condition. And Power Automate did all of the for each loops for me. So I am doing a condition here. I am saying if the approver email from the record equals the email that I was passed from the SharePoint site, right? Then I am setting that Boolean to true. And now down here, I am setting a variable for the text within the PowerApp of the tracking status. So if this is being submitted to all three groups, legal, compliance, and ops, I want that to be reflected. Let's minimize this. Let's cancel here. Let's go look at one that's been submitted. I'm capturing this status right here, submitted to legal, compliance, and ops for approval. We wanted to capture that it was going to all three groups. So now that we have all of this information, what are we doing with it? we are going to now create our item in the tracking list. And here's that tracking list. So we're capturing a whole bunch of information here. We're capturing who it was assigned to, who did it, when they did it, all that. We'll get into the flow here. So we're creating this item. We're just creating the bones of it. We're giving it the title from the main record, right? If I hover over it, we're getting that item, and we could add that right here by clicking the power button or the lightning bolt and type title. And that would be, we would scroll down and we would get the title. And then we're setting the master ID, because this is a one-to-many relationship. That master ID, because there are going to be a lot of these trackings possibly, that ties it back to the ID of the main record. I've done videos on that. And then we're using that variable that I set up here for the tracking status. I forgot to show you that if it was false, set the if it's illegal, we're saying submitted to legal compliance and ops. If it's not, we're submitting it to compliance and ops for approval. So we're capturing both sets there. And whatever that variable is, that's the approval status. So that in the app, we can see who it was submitted, if it was submitted to everybody or just the two groups. Now we get into the approvals, the parallel approvals. All three of these are going to happen at the same time. But you'll notice we have delays in here. If you don't have a minimum delay when we're doing an update on the item, you'll get errors. So we are getting the items from the SharePoint list, again, the approvers list, but we're getting the approvers for ops, right? Approval type equals ops, right there, ops or compliance. And then in that, for each one of those, we're appending to a string every one of those people, because the approval is going to be a first to respond, but it's going to multiple folks, and approval needs a string of email addresses. So for each one of our approvers that we get from this list, and PowerAutomate put it in a for each loop for me, I didn't have to do that, we are appending to string the approver's emails. Now here's a fun thing. So we're also, and I'm trying to scroll up for us, there we go. We're also using a select statement. So when you start an approval, out of the box Microsoft approval, that needs a string of email addresses to run. However, when you're patching to a SharePoint list, and in this case, you see here in the list, we're using a people picker. So we're passing back to this record who it was assigned to, Natalia and Rick, and we're leveraging their full profiles so we can capture everything here. You have to leverage a select statement for that. And here, if we hover over the code, we're getting the output of the item, and we're grabbing the claims for the approver email. So let's create this select statement together. So I'm going to add select. I'm going to type in select, come down here, and what am I capturing in my select statement? I'm going to go to the lightning bolt, and I'm going to go to my body right here, actually, get items, ops approvers. I'm capturing the body value. And then here, because we need the email and all of that information from them, we're capturing the claims, and then the lightning bolt again. And for the get item statement of the approvers, if we click select more or see more, we're getting the approver email. Now that we have that, right, I'm going to delete it because we don't really need it here. We're updating the item. And what item are we updating? We're updating the tracking item that I created, and we're putting in there the approvers that we have, that we just put in the select statement. So now the record is getting updated with these guys here, Natalia and Rick. Now that we have that updated, we're going to start our approval. Now I have deep linking set up on this app, so you'll see the item link here is deep linked. I have a video on that, so go watch it. But we're setting up a first to respond, and we're assigning it to, for testing purposes only, I have it assigned to my created by email address. If it wasn't for testing, we would use this variable, append to string ops approvers, and it would go to everybody. I like to do this for my approvals and my testing because it just makes it so much faster. I don't have to go to someone and say, hey, did you get that email? Can you forward it to me? You'll notice here in the details, I put a comment saying this email will eventually go to, and the string or the variable, so that we can see who it will eventually go to, which is the proper fashion for it. And then we have the link to the ID. Now for each one of these approvals, now Power Automate, even though it's a first to respond, Power Automate is going to put each one of these variables and update statements in a for each loop. You can move them into one, or when you create these, it'll create them in separate ones and you can just click and drag. That's the fabulous thing about the new user interface is you can move these around, right? You saw how I just moved the order. It doesn't really matter order, but if we were to then do this, it would create it in its own for each loop. And then when we appended the variable, the final status, it would put it in its own for each. Just do it in one and it saves on flow runs. It saves on your logic loops too, not really flow runs. Okay, so for each one of the responses from our approval, we are appending to string the comments. So we're capturing ops approval and the outcome of that approval. So did they approve or did they reject it? Now we're capturing the completion dates of when they completed the work, and you could customize this for your use case, who approved it, and I always like to capture the email address. And then we're doing some conditional formatting on, and we'll click on it here. So if they gave us comments, if they did not give us comments, put in no comments provided. But if they did give us comments, give us those comments. So that gives us the ability to either capture comments. Here they said sure, and this looks good, and this is fine with me. Or if we look at this one, no comments provided, no comments provided, no comments provided. Then we assured our end users that even if they didn't say anything, we know that they didn't say anything. So that's what we have going on there. The next one down is we're capturing the final status. Now, ops and the outcome. Did ops approve it or ops reject it? And then we're updating the item, the actual tracking item, not the main record, but this guy, with the outcome of it. We are putting in there the operations approval date, and we're doing some date formatting in there. We're giving it the format that SharePoint likes for year, month, day, and then hours, minutes, seconds. And then we're adding in the approval comments, and then we're putting in there who did it. So if we look at the app, it captures who did it, I did it, and it puts in there the date for me. Ignore the delegation error, that's for something else. So we have it here and we have it here. We have it multiple places. Depending on your environment, you may want to modify this up, change it up a little bit. Have fun. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I am actively responding to everybody there. Then we go up to the top of the scope and we do the same thing for compliance. We're going to add a delay because we're going to get items and then append. We're doing all the same stuff to capture the same things. We're appending to string, we're updating it. Now let's go to legal. Now legal was a different use case, right? We have a condition here. We're going to leverage the Boolean variable that I selected. If it's true, if this is a legal submission, if someone who is tagged as legal submitted the document, again, their use case, whatever, we're going to update and get the approvers and mark it as that. We're going to do the same thing. This email will eventually go to that person. And then in our single for all loop, we are again appending to string, the same comments. We're updating the status, and then we're putting in here the approval date, the comments, and everything. Now here's where we get into some of the fun things. Let me go back up to the top actually and minimize the scopes, because the modern designer makes this so nice. You see how we have all three of these going into one condition. Makes it so nice, right? So now if any one of those condition outcomes equals reject, or there's nothing from legal, right? So this didn't go to legal, then we update. We update the tracking list with rejected and the main item with rejected, and we then update the list approved, the tracking list as approved, and the main record is approved. So this way we have built a reusable parallel flow. So let's try this. Let's play the app. And I'm going to go into this one here. And for testing purposes, I still have this as changeable because we want to play with it. I'm going to send it for approval. Please proceed. hit submit. We get a nice notification out for approval. Okay, so I'm going to pause and pull up Teams. And while Teams is pulling up, let's back out of our approval. I'm going to save it. And let's look here, because now in the main Power Automate, I can go into the flow and we can watch it run. You see, I already have one running. But this will tell us, look at all of our variables are set. There we're able to see the history of when the PowerApp was called, the variables were passed. This was set, this was set, this was set. All of these things were created. We got the item. We're able to see all the information here. We're able to append a string variable, legal. We're getting the legal items. You can see all the happy check marks. Okay, now here we have within Teams our approvals. The nice thing about out-of-the-box approvals is that also within your emails, you get the same experience, right? If we look here, if I click on this one, we're able to see the details. I can add my comments. I can approve or reject. I can do the same thing from Outlook. If I approve it here, I hit submit, you'll notice the body of the email changes. The body of the email is going to change for all the people that got this. That's the fabulous thing about out-of-the-box approvals. So I approved it there. I'm going to reject it here with no comments. And here's the third one. I'm going to approve that with no comments. So pause the video for a sec. Back to the Power Automate. You see here how we've finished all 3 stages. And if we expand out the condition for rejected, we can see that it was rejected. Let's go back to the PowerApp. Here we have our main screen. We see it's now rejected. Let's go in and look at it. Now in my Approvals tab, and I should touch on one thing here. I'm going to pop out of the preview mode. And I have a modern tab list here. And you can see I have some logic to show, let me format the text, to show the Approval tab. This is fighting me, there we go. To show the Approval tab, if there are items in the tracking list that match the master ID of this item. Again, I know this is complicated. If you have any questions in the comments, let me know. Then here, this tab list is a collection of approval steps. Now, where does that collection come from? If we go back to the main gallery, and here I have a button over the gallery items that calls my main arrow here. I've done a video on that. Let me know in the comments though if you have any questions. Here's where we capture our approval steps. You could call this collection whatever you like. So there we go. We're doing 2 things here, and I'll get into both of them. We're getting the prior approval steps. So we're creating this collection. So we're filtering our tracking list by the master ID that equals this item's ID, and we're sorting them ascending. And then we're sequencing and counting the rows of those items in that collection. And let me just double click on this and expand it out so we can look at it together. Here we have all the information for it, but I'm creating a column in here called prior approvals. Where is it? Oh, that's because this is the collection approval steps temp. And then I'm creating another collection called approval steps that take and create a new column for us. And that is going to give us all of the prior steps for the pretty view. There it is right here. So what we're doing here is we're counting the rows in our temporary collection and we're sequencing them. And then we're patching through for every one of those items, the row, and we're adding some text to it. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this. Today's video was just about the flow. So then if we go back here, we're going to minimize this. So on the gallery selection here, we're creating that collection, and that collection gives us these titles here for our tab. And then here within the app, I'm going to scroll down, and the form, the data source is going to be the tracking list. The item, we are going to look up the tab selected ID. So depending on which tab we select, gives us the records from our data source. So here we have the latest one. It was rejected. Please go ahead. No comments, no comments. Approve, reject, approved. You see how we capture everything. And now we have a one source of truth for however many times these things have to go through an approval process. Again, a lot going on here. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to go into more depth on. Happy coding. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts, questions, and any topics you'd like us to cover in future videos. Sharing is caring, so don't forget to share this tutorial with your fellow PowerApps enthusiasts. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep rocking PowerApps like a true pro. See you in the next video.